Okay, so good evening, everyone. Last week we had dealt with the concept of of God's oneness from the perspective of Rav Bachim and Pekuda, and how that transferred over to the Alter Rebbe. Right? We spoke about how Rabbeinu Bachia discussed monotheism, and Alter Rebbe discusses monism, where there's only one God, to there is only God. So now we're on a different. So now I wanted to. So we discussed really how this book, The Gate of Unity and Faith, is a continuation, really, of Rabbeinu Bachia's book, The Gate of Unity, or the Gate of Oneness, which I say section of the book. So this is part 2 of that, in a sense. However, now let us take another look. Let's look about how this book is part 2 of the book that it's part of, the book, the Tanya itself. Now, I had mentioned that the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, original intention was that this book should be the first book of Tanya, not the second. So how did it end up as the book number 2 of Tanya? So I want to suggest to you that that the main focus of Tanya is Avodas Hashem, serving God. That's the main thrust of the book. The Alter Rebbe wants to teach us how to serve God, and he's only introducing intellectual and philosophical notions for the purpose of helping us serve God better. He's not doing it because he wants to take us on a mental trip. He's doing it because somehow this concept plays into serving God. In fact, everything we learn, everything intellectual, plays into serving God. There is no, the whole Torah was with all the intellectual information in it, was only meant for serving God. All the sciences of the world are just meant for serving God. In fact, one of my Rebbeim, Rabbi Moshe Schatz, had taught me that secular wisdom is really Torah that has kind of gotten distracted. It was a miscarriage of Torah, and it turned into secular wisdom. What happened was that some Shavuos, where God was going to bring a revelation of wisdom, Torah wisdom in the world, instead of that wisdom reaching our Torah sages because of the state of Galut, it got diverted to the universities and to the professors. So really, all the wisdoms of the world are part of Torah. They're not separate from Torah. So, the Torah, because the Torah is the source of wisdom. Ki mikara chochma. So what you're really getting over here is that the Alter Rebbe, is only giving us here information so that we could serve God. All the information in the world is just meant to serving God. And you may ask, well, why do we need all this information to serve God? Because everything in the world really wants to serve God, and they can only do it through human agency. Everything wants to be part of serving God, and that can only be accomplished through human agency. So a plant can only serve God through human agency. A fruit can only serve God through human agency. An animal can only serve God through human agency, because everything else are not inherently beings of free choice and capable of serving God on their own. So the more we know about them, the more we're capable of incorporating them into our service of God. If you really think about it, the plastic and metal that went into the chair I'm sitting on had yearned to serve God from its inception. And now that I'm sitting on it and teaching Torah, it's part of serving God. Take wisdom to understand how to put it together. And that's just a simple example. I mean, you get more sophisticated examples like computers, electricity, electrons. So everything plays into serving God. So here too, the Alter Rebbe is teaching us a concept for serving God. There's a phrase in Sefer Yetzirah. This phrase is, now there's several versions of Sefer Yetzirah. So I'm quoting the phrase from the version that the Alter Rebbe quotes. Okay, there are other ways, there are other versions of Sefer Yetzirah that have this phrase a little differently. It says that Imratz libecha shuv le'echad. If your heart runs, return to the oneness. You hear? What this is telling the mystic is, if you are ascending the ladder and you come to a place and in your ascent, instead of being able to go further, you hit a place of where you can't go any further. It's too much to take. It's too overwhelming, possibly too confusing. Just simply regroup, regain balance by regrouping, regain balance by going back to God's oneness. Go back to basics. There's several ways of understanding this, but this is a basic idea, because the Alter Rebbe here is going to talk about somebody who's in the process of Avodas Hashem. And it says, Chanoch lanar al pi darkoi, educate the youth according to his way. Gam ki yazkin, because when he grows older, lo yoser mimena, he will not depart from it. So, what is the way of the youth? It means the way at the person's inception of serving God, where he learned about God's oneness as the foundation of everything. Go back to the foundation. You're getting overwhelmed, you're getting confused. You thought you were climbing the levels, and you thought you were ascending, which actually in Judaism means downloading your soul, because that's what spiritual growth is in Judaism. You download more of your soul. So more of your soul is also involved in serving God. That's the advantage of growing spiritually, that now you've brought into consciousness more of your soul, so more of your soul itself can be involved in serving God more directly. You've taken the surrounding light of your soul and you brought it in, made it from or makif to or panimi. Now it's in you, and you could use it to serve God. When you put tefillin on, there's more of your soul involved in serving God. When you do tzedakah, there's more of your soul involved in serving God. When you make a bracha, a blessing over your food, there's more of your soul involved in serving God. Just like all the wisdoms of the world yearn to become part of serving God, so too all of your soul yearns to become part of serving God. So he's trying to move up the ladder, download more of his soul, but his kalim, his vessels, his mind can't take it, and it's too overwhelming, possibly even too confusing. So let us Alter Rebbe say, Shuv lechad, return to the oneness, go back to basics, go back to the foundation of everything, that there is one God. That's at the foundation of everything. So that there's only God. And, you know, but now you know why he made it book 2. He made it book 2 because first he wants to teach you how to serve God before you have to settle, before you get overwhelmed and have to settle your mind.
Mm.
In other words, it's both chapter 1 and it's chapter 2, because it's the link between each level of growth.
It's the starting point, but it's also the returning point.
Exactly. It's the you have to come back to it as you're growing. And I'll tell you an interesting story where I had to use this phrase. It was actually the other way around. I had a temp job years ago that really threw me through a loop. It only lasted about a week, and it was a place that was very uncomfortable for me to work at. I could, my mind was jostled when I came back from work in the evening, when I sat on the train on the ride home. And then it came to me. Imratz libchi, heart is running with all these confusing, crazy thoughts. Shuv le'echad, take a deep breath and contemplate the oneness. Contemplate that it's all part of the oneness. So it works in both directions, both moving up, and sometimes when you have to move down from your comfort zone in spirituality to deal with the world. Okay, so let us look inside. I'd like to take you to the introduction. Last time I taught this, I did not do the introduction, and but I really believe that the introduction is important. So in the standard Tanya, it's page 150. Likute Amorim Chelik Shein. You have it, Adam?
Hold on 1 second. I'm good. 1 second. Let's see if I can find it.
Okay.
1 second. Let's see. I had. Let's see. I had those white volumes, like a 4-volume set.
Okay, so pick volume 3. It should be the very beginning.
Volume 3.
Yeah, you're talking about lessons in Tanya.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Okay, it should be at the very beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me see. It's a little dark here. Okay. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, great. Okay. Chanoch Lanar Alpi. Wait, we'll start from the top page. Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni, a collection of sayings, the second section. The Alter Rebbe always referred to that he taught as a collection of sayings because he felt, that all he was doing was compiling what he heard from the past. Hanikra b'shem chinuch katan. It's called educating a youngster. Melukat mipi svarim mipi seifrim, collected from books and from scribes. Kedoshei Elyoin nishmasam Eden, from the who are very, very holy. Their souls are in Eden, in paradise. Miyusad al Parsha Rishon Shel Kriyat Shema, founded on the first section of the Shema affirmation. So the now when the Alter Rebbe says mipi svarim, from scribes, I remember being told by Rabbi Jacobson, that means the Maharal and the Shla. And when he says mipi soifrim, that means, if I remember correctly, I believe that means the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. Okay, so now we look in that big box on the page, Chanoch. You got it, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, mine doesn't have a box, but
Oh, that's right. You have a different. Okay. Chanoch lanar al pi darko. Educate the youth according to his way. Gam ki yazkin lo yoser menu. Thus, when he gets older, he will not steer away from it. Now, this is a verse in Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs, known as Mishlei. V'hine midechsiv al pi darkoi mashma she'eno derech ha'emes la'mitoi. The Alter Rebbe begins with a question right away. It says, educate him according to his way. One moment over here. His way may very well not be the true way. You're applying a subjective standard. Truth is supposed to have an objective quality to it. You hear?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Bimkain my malyusa shigam ki yazkin lo yoser mena. And furthermore, then what was gained when he gets older that he had not desisted from it? If he learned bad habits, right? And now you're going to tell it, you say, teach him according to his bad habits, because, when he gets older, he won't desist from it. It reminds me of my grandfather of blessed memory. He was an avid tennis player. But in his youth, when he first learned the game, he couldn't afford, he grew up in a poverty-stricken family, and he couldn't afford an instructor. So he had so now it was already in his late 50s, maybe in his 60s already, and he's telling me that he's still practicing with the tennis instructor to unlearn his bad habits
Yeah.
that he acquired from back then.
Yeah.
So that's cool. That's the goal. So let him pick up bad habits, or useless habits, so that this way he should, when he gets older, he won't desist from it. Achine muda sos ki shorshe avodas Hashem v'doiseha hein dechilu rechimu. You should know that the root of serving God is fear and love. Hayira, okay. Hayira shayrish v'yisoid li surmeira. Fear is the root of turning away from evil. V'hava lasois leva'asei toiv. And v'kiyum kol mitzvahs asei deiraisa v'rabanon. And love of Hashem, that is the root of fulfilling all the mitzvahs, and doing all the positive commandments. So fear is the root of turning away from evil, and obviously staying away from the don't do's, the things the Torah warns us not to do. And loving God, that is the source of doing all the do mitzvahs, the things the Torah tells us we must do.
Right.
U'mitzvahs achinuch gam kein mitzvahs aseh. And the mitzvah of educating children is also one of the do mitzvahs, the positive commandments. as is written in Kemoshe Kosu Ba'or Chaim Simen Shimen Gimel. It's written in there. V'hine b'hava ksiv b'soif parshas Ekev asher anoichi b'tzave eschem la'soisa lahavas Hashem goimer. It says about loving God at the end of the Torah portion of Ekev, which is in Deuteronomy. That as I command you today to do it, to love God. The question is, how can we talk about a command how can we legislate an emotion? The Torah is commanding us to love God. How can you legislate an emotion? Emotions are more spontaneous in nature, they're wild, they're woolly, they're passionate. How can you legislate emotion?
Right. Famous question. Yeah.
Right. Acha inyan hu diyesh minei ahavas Hashem. However, you should know that there are two kinds of loving God. Loving God comes in two categories, two flavors. Ha'achas hi kilois ha'nefesh b'tiv'ah el boira kasher tiskaber nefesh ha'sichlis ala choimer v'sashbileu v'sachnieu tachteha. One is what's it called? The soul on its own by its nature trying to leave the body because it's loosening from the body because it's filled with such a passion for God. V'tislahe azai tislahe v'tislahe k'shalheves ha'oila me'aleh. Then it's flaring up like a torch that comes up on its own, that rises on the flame rises on its own. V'togel v'tismach b'Hashem, and it's gleefully celebrating in God. It's celebrating God, its maker. V'tisaneg al Hashem tanug nifla, and it has such pleasure in God, that unbelievable pleasure in God. It's deep state of spiritual pleasure. So it's like they've been given, the person who is privileged to have this experience of love of God. It's like they've experienced the taste of the Garden of Eden, the taste of paradise, while they're in their bodies. And those people who are privileged to have such a great experience of love of God, these people are called tzaddikim. And he means his definition of a tzaddik. Remember what the Alter Rebbe's definition of a tzaddik is? Adam, remember?
That's someone who has no Yetzer Hara, really.
Right.
It destroyed his Yetzer Hara.
Exactly. He transformed his Yetzer Hara.
Transformed it. Okay.
He made it into a second Yetzer Tov. He worked on himself so much. Of course, he had a Yetzer Hara, but he was one of those rare souls that was given the ability not only to succeed over his Yetzer Hara, to dominate his Yetzer Hara, but also to transform his Yetzer Hara into a second Yetzer Tov. And that's rare. That takes a soul from a very special level. Not everyone is zeicha to that. When other people use the word tzaddik, they're using it more in the borrowed term of the word. And so, he's such a tzaddik. That's in the borrowed term. The truth be told, that every Jew has a Bechina Tzaddik. And you could be referring that this person's aspect of tzaddik been very activated. But the true tzaddik is someone who is, really someone who's transformed into a second Yetzer Tov, into a second, or should I say, Nefesh Elokis, divine soul. Kidichsiv, as it is written, Simchu tzadikim b'Hashem, that the tzadikim rejoice in God, the saintly rejoice in God. Ach lo kol adam zeichel lezeh, but not everyone is privileged to achieve such a level. Ki lezeh tzorech zikuch hachomer b'ma'oid ma'oid. For such a level, a person has to make the materialism of his body extremely, extremely transparent, very, very purified, very transparent. Can't block the soul. The soul has to, like light going through a window, the soul has to go through his body.
How can the clothes block the soul?
The body can can block the soul.
It obscures it.
It obscures it. It doesn't. It has to. I'm not saying it entirely does it, but to one extent or another, it does it. Especially if a person has a very, very strong desire to receive, has a strong level of selfish concern. These things can block. A person doesn't align himself properly with God, or doesn't care about it, is not sensitive to what life is really about. These things are blockages. V'gam toiru masim toivim harbe lizkos l'neshama elyoina shelamayla mimadregas ruach v'nefesh k'moshe kosav b'reishis chochma sharahava. And also a person has to do tremendous amount of Torah and mitzvahs in order to attain a neshama level that's beyond his ruach and his nefesh level of the soul, as it's stated in the book called Reishis Chochma Sharahava. So, what's the concept? Well, they're telling us we're at the 10-minute. Okay, got 10 more minutes. Okay. So, what is the concept? The concept is that a person has to really work on himself in order to attain a neshama level. Most of us, the process of growth is everyone starts easily with a nefesh and a ruach, and through tikkun you get a neshama. You manifest neshama.
It means it becomes integrated with you?
Yeah, it becomes integrated. Exactly. The nefesh and ruach, of course we're talking relative levels, because there's a relative level of nefesh, a relative level of ruach. There could be a ruach of a nefesh and a nefesh of a ruach, and a neshama of a nefesh, and a ruach of a ruach. Levels that we're talking about relative levels. But whatever relative level is appropriate for the person, so that person automatically is born with a nefesh level, which is a vital soul. It vitalizes the body, and a ruach level is spirit. Tikkun, the process of tikkun, downloads the neshama level, brings it into greater integration. And that's what he's talking about. A tzaddik is zeicha to. A tzaddik is, as the saintly are privileged to attain. Now, that is, now the book he's quoting, Reishis Chochmah, is a very interesting work. Reishis Chochmah, I believe, was written by Rabbi Eliyahu Levitas, and it collected.
Rabbi Eliyahu. Yeah.
And it
Rabbi Eliyahu Vidas. Yeah.
Vidas, and it collected from all over the Zohar teachings on the Midas. So, for example, we're talking about the 7 lowest spheres, which are the Midas. So, there's a Shar HaChesed, there's a Shar Ahava, I should say, a gate of love. Then there's a Shar Yira for Gevura. Then there's probably a Shar Rachmim. I guess it goes on, but it teaches you how to use your Midas. And calling it's entirely woven together excerpts of the Zohar on this topic. So he reorganized from all over the Zohar on these particular topics. So it's a Musar Sefer made straight from the Zohar.
Yeah, I have it here in my house.
So
I've learned a little bit of it, only a little bit.
Right. So, but the Alter Rebbe quotes it quite a bit.
Yeah.
So now he's going to talk about the average person. Vashenis, the second kind of love, Yahava shekol odom yochol ligia lahagia eleha kishe yisboinen heitiv beumka deliba bedevarim hamaoirim es ahava laHashem belev kol Yisrael. The second kind of love, this is a love that everyone can attain. It's a love for God everyone can attain, and it comes when a person spends time in deep contemplation on matters that arouse love. You think about how about God's greatness, how kind He is to you. You know, it says, "Kamayim hapanim l'panim kein lev adam ela adam." As waters reflect face to face, so too the heart of one man to another. So you contemplate God's kindness. You yourself feel a bubbling of love for God, who is so kind to you. He gives you your daily bread, gives you the roof over your head. Gives you your life, gives you your spouse, gives you your children, gives you your means of mobility, your health, your wealth, you name it. You think of God who gave you the Torah and who put himself out for such a relationship with you specifically as a Jew, and how precious that is. You contemplate themes like this, and you think about how God had abandoned the higher worlds that are filled with light and so scintillating with light, and He came down to bring the Torah down to an earthly group of people, down specifically to this world. And you think of all those precious angels that were bypassed in the process. And you sit in contemplation on these kind of themes of the style, and it arouses a love for God, a yearning for God. And that's what he's talking about here.
So this pasuk in Akav that we quoted before,
right?
It's a commandment to love Hashem. So the commandment is to basically work on yourself to come to a love of Hashem.
Right, exactly. The commandment is to contemplate. to spend time in contemplation so that you come to the state of loving God. That's exactly the point. And he's going to say that. He's going to say that pretty soon. Ve'hein derech klal, and this is in a general sense, ki hu chayenu mamish, because God is literally our life. When you contemplate how God is literally our life, v'kasher odom oyev es nafshe v'chayev ken yehav es Hashem. As a person loves his own life, so he should love God, because God is, you might say, the soul of his soul, in a sense. So loving God is really loving yourself, because your soul, the soul of your life, the light of your soul extends from God's infinite light. So therefore, loving God is part of loving yourself. That's one angle to look at it from. Kasher yispoinench diyosim alibo ki Hashem hu nafshay hamitus. When you think about it, you place it on your heart. And it says, "V'ashevois elevecha," you shall return it upon your heart. You place it on your heart that Hashem is your true life. V'chayav mamash, He's really your life. K'moshe kosav b'zayar al posik nafshi ivisicha b'alayla gomer. It says in the Zohar on the verse, my soul, I seek you at night. And so this is one angle at it. He's going to go into further. Ve'hein derech prat. And not only that, when you think about it for the individual itself. Okay, so anyways, it looks like they're going to close us up. So God willing, Bli Neder Mirtz Hashem will continue next week.
Okay.
Okay, have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bakasha, my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
My pleasure. Have a good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.